If on the most solitary day of your life, a simple gesture from a stranger changed everything forever? Imagine a successful man, elegantly dressed and standing at the entrance of a crowded restaurant in Lekki. It's his 41st birthday, but no one is waiting for him. The receptionist shakes her head as he forces a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Then, from a simple table by the window, a woman with tired but warm eyes does something unexpected. She waves her hand. This silent gesture is about to change 2 lives forever. Stay until the end of this story and discover why sometimes true wealth comes in the simplest gestures. Akin never imagined that turning 41 would feel as empty as arriving at a restaurant with no one waiting on the other side. The October night fell over Lagos with that crisp air that invites celebration, but he only felt the weight of another date on the calendar without real meaning. He had chosen that place because it was recommended as the best in Lekki, thinking that at least good food could fill the void he carried in his chest. He adjusted his agbada as he walked towards the entrance, mentally rehearsing the smile he would show the staff. He didn't want anyone to notice that he was alone, that he hadn't even received a birthday call that day. The sound of laughter and conversations escaped through the wooden doors of the restaurant, reminding him of all he lacked. He took a deep breath before pushing the door open, preparing to pretend everything was fine. But inside, every step towards that vibrant place only amplified his loneliness. Soft Afrobeats music floated in the air, mixing with the aroma of freshly baked puff-puff and grilled suya. Akin observed the tables occupied by families, couples, and groups of friends laughing carelessly. Everyone seemed to have exactly what he lacked: true companionship. He approached the reception counter, where a young woman with a pleasant smile greeted him professionally. "Good evening, welcome. Do you have a reservation?" she asked, checking her computer screen. Akin shook his head, suddenly feeling he should have planned this moment better. The receptionist's expression changed slightly as she checked the system's availability, and Akin knew the answer before she opened her mouth. "I'm so sorry, sir, but at the moment we don't have any tables available," she said with genuine pity in her voice. Akin felt it as if it were no big deal, as if this wasn't the climax of a day that had already started badly from dawn. "How long would the wait be?" he asked, though a part of him already wanted to leave. The young woman consulted the screen again and frowned with concern. "At least an hour and a half, maybe 2. It's Friday night, and besides, there are several family celebrations," she explained, discreetly pointing to the crowded dining area. Akin looked into the restaurant and felt a pang in his stomach. Family celebrations, exactly what he didn't have. "I understand. Thank you anyway," he mumbled, taking a step back, determined to leave. The receptionist seemed to want to say something more, but he was already turning towards the exit. The failure of this night added to all the other emotional failures he had accumulated over the years. Perhaps he would order something for takeout elsewhere and eat alone in his apartment, as he almost always did. But something stopped him before he reached the door. Maybe it was the pride of not wanting to go home so soon, or perhaps the ridiculous hope that someone would cancel their reservation at that exact moment. He stood near the entrance, watching people come and go, all accompanied, all with someone. A young couple passed him hand in hand, laughing at something only they understood. A group of friends crossed the door, animatedly discussing an Enyimba match. A large family arrived with children running around their parents. And there he was, Akin, the man who had built a business empire but had failed to build a personal life worth living. 41 years old, and no one with whom to share a simple birthday dinner. He leaned against the wall, feeling more out of place with each passing second. The buzz around him contrasted brutally with the silence that reigned in his life. He closed his eyes for a moment, wondering at what point things had deviated so much from what he once dreamed of. When he was younger, he imagined that by this age he would have a family, children, someone who would await him at home with genuine affection. Instead, he had full bank accounts and an increasingly empty heart. He opened his eyes, and his gaze wandered aimlessly around the restaurant, searching for who knows what, amidst that sea of unknown faces. And then he saw her, a small table by the window, almost hidden behind a decorative pillar. There, a woman with dark hair, tied in a ponytail, shared a single dish with a child of about 9 years old. It wasn't the most elegant table, nor was it in the best location in the place. In fact, it looked like one of those tables the restaurant kept for when it was completely packed. But there was something about that scene that immediately captured his attention. The woman cut small pieces of food and placed them on the child's plate before taking something for herself. The boy said something with enthusiasm, and she smiled tenderly, stroking his hair with a gesture so natural that it revealed years of unconditional love. They didn't have much. That was evident from the way they shared that single dish. But they had something Akin hadn't had in a long time, companionship that mattered. And at that moment, observing that modest table by the window, Akin felt something he didn't expect to feel. It wasn't envy, it was a deep longing for something as simple as not dining alone on his own birthday. Akin couldn't take his eyes off that table by the window, as if the scene had a strange magnetism that kept him anchored to that corner of the restaurant. The woman looked up at that moment, and their eyes met for a fraction of a second before he looked away, feeling ridiculous for having stared so fixedly. He wondered what they were celebrating, or if they were simply having dinner on a regular Friday, like so many other families in that place. Perhaps she too had had a long and difficult day, but at least she wasn't facing it alone. The child leaned over to whisper something in her ear, and she nodded with a smile that briefly illuminated her tired face. Akin felt a pang of something, akin to nostalgia, for something he had never had. He remembered that he should leave already, that standing there watching them was becoming increasingly strange. He took a step towards the door, determined to truly leave this time. But just as he was about to exit, he heard a child's voice call him from behind. "Sir." It was the child from the table by the window. Akin turned around, confused, not understanding why that boy was calling him. The little one looked at him with big, curious eyes, and then turned to his mother as if seeking confirmation of something. The woman was now watching him directly, with an expression Akin couldn't immediately decipher. It wasn't pity, nor morbid curiosity. There was something softer in that gaze, something akin to the silent understanding between people who recognize another's pain without needing words. She exchanged a complicit look with her son, as if they were making an important decision together. At that instant, Akin was paralyzed midway between his desire to flee and the strange sensation that something significant was about to happen. The woman raised her hand with a discreet but unmistakable gesture. It wasn't a greeting, nor a simple acknowledgement. It was an invitation. She pointed with a subtle movement of her head to the empty chair at her table, and then offered him a small smile that completely transformed her tired face. The child was also smiling now, making a more animated gesture with his hand for him to come closer. Akin looked around as if expecting to discover they were signaling to someone else. But no, they were definitely inviting him to sit with them. Two complete strangers who had just offered him exactly what he needed most at that moment, a place at the table. His first instinct was to refuse the offer. What would people say if they saw him sitting with a woman and a child who were clearly not his family? Wouldn't it be awkward to interrupt their dinner with his presence? But then he remembered that only a few minutes ago he had been standing by the entrance, without a table, without company, without anyone remembering him on his birthday. And these two people, without knowing him, without knowing anything about him, were offering him something no one else had offered him in a very long time. Akin walked slowly towards the table, feeling that each step was a conscious decision to accept something greater than a simple chair. The woman straightened her posture as he approached, and the child practically bounced in his seat with excitement. When he reached the table, Akin stood, unsure of how to proceed in such an unusual situation. "Good evening," he said, his voice hoarser than he would have liked. Clearing his throat afterward, the woman smiled at him with genuine warmth. "Good evening. Forgive us if we're too direct, but we noticed you're waiting for a table," she began in a soft but clear voice. "We have space here, and we'd be pleased to share." Akin blinked, surprised by the naturalness with which she had verbalized what they both knew was true. "I don't want to interrupt your dinner," he replied automatically, though every fiber of his being wished to accept that invitation. The child shook his head vigorously. "You're not interrupting anything, sir. Look, there's an empty chair right here," the boy declared, proudly pointing to the spot, as if he were the one doing the honors of the house. The woman chuckled softly at her son's enthusiasm. "This is Kachi, and I'm Amara," she introduced herself, extending her hand with a gesture so natural that Akin had no choice but to reciprocate. Her hand was warm and firm, the hand of someone accustomed to hard work. "Akin," he said, shaking it, feeling a strange knot forming in his throat. Amara pointed to the empty chair with a gesture that made it clear she wouldn't take no for an answer. "Please, sit down. No one should wait so long to have dinner on a Friday night," she added with a smile that contained more wisdom than her early 30s would suggest. Akin finally sat down, placing his hands on the table, unsure what to do with them. Kachi watched him with that unfiltered curiosity only children can have. Amara moved the plate they had been sharing to one side, and called the waiter with a discreet wave of her hand. Akin realized at that moment that they had only ordered one dish for two, which spoke volumes about their economic situation, without anyone having to say a word. He suddenly felt uncomfortable, aware of the abysmal difference between his world and theirs. The waiter approached quickly, perhaps recognizing there was a new diner at the table. "Do you wish to order anything else?" the young waiter asked professionally. Akin opened his mouth to say he would pay for everything, that they could order whatever they wanted, but Amara interjected. "Just a glass of water for the gentleman, please." "Thank you," she said with firm but kind politeness. The waiter nodded and withdrew, leaving the three in a silence that could have been awkward, but strangely wasn't. Kachi broke the ice first. "Are you also waiting for someone, Mr. Akin?" the child asked with absolute innocence. Amara cast a gentle warning glance at her son. "Kachi, don't ask personal questions," she gently reprimanded him, but Akin shook his head. "It's all right," he assured, and then looked the child directly in the eyes. "No, I'm not waiting for anyone, my boy. I came alone." Akin's confession floated in the air like something fragile that could break with any abrupt movement. Kachi looked at him with those big eyes, full of childlike curiosity, processing the idea that someone could go to a restaurant alone. Amara glanced at her plate for a moment, as if wanting to give privacy to that vulnerable acknowledgement. The waiter returned with the glass of water and placed it before Akin discreetly before withdrawing again. Akin picked up the glass just to have something to do with his hands, feeling the cold glass against his palms. Kachi leaned across the table with a thoughtful expression. "And you don't have family, sir?" the child asked with that brutal honesty only little ones can express without filters. Amara closed her eyes briefly, clearly wanting to stop that line of questioning, but not knowing how to do so without embarrassing her son. Akin took a deep breath, deciding that if these strangers had opened their table to him, he could at least offer them the truth. "I have family, Kachi," he replied in a calm voice. "But we live very far from each other. We hardly see each other anymore." Amara looked up, and their gazes met again. There was understanding in those tired eyes, as if she understood exactly what that distance, which wasn't only geographical, meant. "Sometimes, the family we choose is closer than blood," Amara murmured almost to herself, and then seemed to realize she had said it aloud. She blushed slightly and took a sip of her soft drink. Kachi nodded seriously, as if those words held deep meaning for him too. Akin felt curious to know what story lay behind that statement, but he didn't dare to ask. Instead, Kachi changed the subject with the typical ease of children. "Today was a very special day for us, Mr. Akin," the little one exclaimed with evident pride in every word. Amara stroked his hair tenderly, while a genuine smile lit up her face. "You tell him, my love, it was your achievement," she encouraged in a soft voice. Kachi straightened in his chair, radiant with happiness. "I sold all the chin-chin my mum prepared," he announced as if it were the most important news in the world. Akin raised his eyebrows with genuine interest. "All of them? That's very impressive, my boy," he replied, and the child's smile grew even wider. Kachi began to tell with enthusiasm how he had spent the entire afternoon selling chin-chin in front of a bakery. Amara watched him with that maternal love that needs no words to express itself, evident in every gesture and every look she gave her son. Akin listened to the little seller's story and felt something strange moving in his chest. He had closed multi-million naira deals. He had negotiated with powerful businessmen, but it had been a long time since he had seen that kind of pure pride shining in Kachi's eyes. "My mum makes the best chin-chin and puff-puff in all of Lagos," Kachi declared with absolute certainty. "That's why they sell quickly." Amara chuckled softly and shook her head. "He exaggerates, my darling, but thank you," she said with genuine humility. Then she turned to Akin and added with a shy smile, "I prepare traditional snacks to sell. It's a way to help with expenses while I look for something more stable." Akin nodded, understanding without her having to explain further. That dinner was not casual. It was a hard-earned celebration, with hours of work and the pride of a child who had helped his mother. "And you, what are you celebrating?" Kachi asked with that curiosity that knows no bounds. "Because people come here when there's something special, isn't that right?" Akin felt the weight of that innocent question. Amara cast an apologetic look at Akin, clearly preparing to once again scold Kachi for being so direct. But Akin raised a hand to stop her. "It's no problem, really," he assured, and then looked at the child. "Today is my birthday, Kachi. I'm turning 41. Kachi's face lit up as if he had just received the best news of the day. "It's your birthday," the child exclaimed with genuine emotion. Amara observed Akin with a mixture of surprise and something that seemed like contained sadness. "And you came alone to celebrate it," she murmured, not as a question, but as a realization of something that now made sense. Akin shrugged, trying to downplay it. I'm used to it, he admitted with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It's no big deal. But Kachi vigorously shook his head. Of course it's a big deal. Birthdays are the most important days of the year, the child declared with the absolute conviction of someone who still believes in the magic of celebrations. Amara reached out and placed it gently on Aiken's hand in a spontaneous gesture of comfort. The contact was brief but meaningful. No one should spend their birthday alone, Amara said in a firm but gentle voice. I'm glad you accepted to sit with us. Aiken felt a knot forming in his throat. He couldn't remember the last time someone had genuinely welcomed his company without expecting anything in return. Kachi was already plotting something. That was evident from the way he looked at his mother with that conspiratorial expression children develop with their parents. Mum, can we do something special? The child whispered loud enough for Aiken to hear. Amara smiled and nodded slightly. We'll see, my love, she replied with a wink. The conversation flowed naturally after that. Kachi told school stories with the enthusiasm of someone who had 1,000 things to share. Amara occasionally intervened to correct her son's exaggerations or add details he forgot. Aiken found himself genuinely laughing for the first time in weeks, maybe months. It wasn't the polite business laugh. It was genuine, spontaneous, provoked by the way Kachi imitated his teacher or described his classmates. For a moment, sitting at that modest table by the window, Aiken forgot who he was. He wasn't the lonely businessman, nor the man who had sacrificed everything for success. The waiter passed by their table, and Aiken took the opportunity to order more drinks, insisting that they at least allow him to pay for the soft drinks. Amara accepted with a grateful smile, though Aiken noticed the way she squeezed the napkin between her fingers, as if receiving help was difficult for her. Kachi was absorbed, drawing figures in the condensation on his glass, when Aiken decided to ask a question that had been lingering in his mind. And Kachi's father? He asked carefully, aware that he might be entering painful territory. Amara took a deep breath and looked out the window for a moment before answering. Kachi stopped playing with his glass and became quiet, his body language changing instantly. My husband passed away 2 years ago, she replied, her voice slow but firm. A work accident. It was very sudden. Aiken felt a pang of guilt for having asked. I'm so sorry. He began to apologize, but Amara shook her head. No need to apologize. Enough time has passed for me to talk about it, she assured with a strength Aiken immediately admired. Kachi took his mother's hand on the table and squeezed it affectionately. My daddy was very strong, the child said with pride, mixed with sadness. He was the best father in the world, and he left me the best son anyone could ask for, Amara continued, stroking Kachi's hair. The way she spoke of her deceased husband held no bitterness or resentment. There was pain, of course, but there was also acceptance and gratitude for the time they had together. Aiken watched, fascinated, how someone could transform such a devastating loss into strength. How do you manage? He asked before he could stop himself. Sorry, that's too personal. Amara looked him directly in the eyes with that gaze that seemed to see beyond the surface. How do I manage what, exactly? She asked with genuine curiosity. Aiken gestured vaguely, searching for the right words. To smile like that? To talk about something so painful without it showing that you're destroyed inside, he explained with difficulty. Amara let out a soft laugh that was neither joyful nor sad. Who said I'm not destroyed inside? She replied with brutal honesty. But I have a son who needs to see that life goes on, that pain is not the end of everything. Kachi nodded with a seriousness inappropriate for his age. Mummy cries sometimes at night, the child confessed without malice. But she says tears cleanse the heart. Aiken felt something breaking inside his chest. This woman, who clearly struggled every day just to survive, had found a way to convert her suffering into life lessons for her son. The first few months were terrible, Amara admitted. There were days I didn't want to get out of bed, but Kachi needed me. And I discovered that when you choose to get up for someone else, even if it's the last thing you want to do, something inside you also strengthens. Aiken listened to every word as if they were revelations from a world he had never known. He had faced business challenges, financial crises, difficult negotiations, but he had never had to turn pure pain into fuel to keep going. I learned to convert tiredness into courage, Amara continued in a soft voice. Because if I allowed myself to stay in my exhaustion, I wouldn't be able to give Kachi what he deserves. The child looked at his mother with absolute adoration. My mummy is the bravest person I know, Kachi declared with total conviction. Aiken couldn't help but agree. I think your son is right, Aiken said sincerely. What you've done is extraordinary. Amara blushed slightly at the compliment. I'm not extraordinary. I'm just a mother, doing what all mothers do, surviving for their children, she replied with genuine humility. But Akin knew that wasn't entirely true. He had met people with much more money and resources who had collapsed in the face of far less. The conversation then drifted to lighter topics. Kachi recounted how he and his mother played invented games when they didn't have money to go out. Amara shared anecdotes of Kachi's first attempts to help her sell chin-chin when he ate more than he sold. Akin found himself sharing things he normally didn't tell anyone. He spoke of how he had built his company from scratch, of sleepless nights and difficult decisions. But as he spoke, he realized something disturbing. All his stories were about work, about success, about achievements measurable in money. He had no anecdotes about shared laughter or moments of real human connection. Amara seemed to notice this realization on his face. "Success can be very lonely," she murmured with understanding. "I didn't know how much until this moment," Akin admitted in a barely audible voice. Kachi watched him with that particular attention children have when they sense adults are saying something important. "My mummy says money can't buy real hugs," the child shared innocently. "Is that true, Mr. Akin?" Akin felt a huge weight in his chest at such a simple and devastating question. "It's absolutely true, my boy," he replied in a broken voice. "Your mother is very wise." Amara extended her hand again, and this time she kept it on. Akin's a little longer. "We all have our battles," she said gently. "Yours are different from mine, but that doesn't mean they hurt less." Akin looked at that hand over his, small and calloused, but offering more comfort than he had received in years. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel judged for his success, nor for his personal failure. He simply felt seen as the ordinary man he was beneath all the titles and bank accounts, seen as someone who also needed a kind gesture on his birthday. And at that modest table by the window, something inside him began to change in ways he couldn't yet fully comprehend. Akin was so engrossed in the conversation that he didn't notice when Kachi subtly signaled to the waiter passing by their table. The child whispered something in the young employee's ear, who nodded with a knowing smile before quickly walking away. Amara didn't seem to notice either, busy explaining to Akin how she had learned her traditional snack recipes from her maternal grandmother. She used to say that every snack carried a little piece of love, Amara recounted nostalgically. That's why they tasted better than the ones in stores. Kachi nodded as he listened to his mother, but his eyes gleamed with something more than simple agreement. There was contained emotion in his expression, as if he knew something the adults hadn't yet discovered. Akin shared some memories of his own childhood, things he hadn't remembered in years. He spoke of afternoons at his grandmother's house, the smell of freshly made akara, of simpler times. "Sometimes, I think I exchanged everything good for things I thought would make me happy," Akin reflected aloud. Amara watched him attentively, without interrupting. "It's never too late to reclaim what matters," she murmured with conviction. The waiter then appeared from the kitchen, walking carefully while holding a small tray. On the tray was a small round cake, no bigger than a dessert plate, simply decorated, but with obvious care. And in the center, a lit candle glowed, its flame moving gently with the restaurant air. The waiter approached the table and placed the cake before Akin with a kind smile. "Courtesy of your companions," the young man announced, pointing to Kachi, who practically bounced in his chair with excitement. Akin was paralyzed, staring at that small cake with the solitary candle. Amara put a hand to her mouth, clearly surprised by her son's initiative. "Kachi, when did you ask for this?" she asked softly. The child smiled proudly. "When you went to the toilet a little while ago, Mum. I gave the waiter the money I saved from my sales," Kachi explained naturally, "because no one should blow out their candle alone on their birthday." The child's words hit Akin like a punch directly to the heart. He felt a sudden burning in his eyes and had to blink several times to hold back the tears. This little boy, who barely knew him, had used the money he had worked so hard to earn. "Kachi, you didn't need to," Akin began in a trembling voice, but the child shook his head. "Of course I did," Kachi insisted with that absolute certainty of children. "You're alone on your birthday? That's not right." Amara looked at her son with tears in her eyes, clearly proud of the generous heart beating in that small chest. Then she turned to Akin and gave him a smile that contained understanding, tenderness, and something else he couldn't identify. "My son has the biggest heart I've ever known," she murmured, her voice filled with emotion. "Sometimes I wonder where he gets so much kindness." Kachi shrugged, as if what he had done was the most normal thing in the world. "You taught me, Mum. You said sharing the little you have is better than not sharing anything," the child reminded simply. Akin couldn't take his eyes off that candle that continued to burn, illuminating the table with its small but persistent light. People at nearby tables began to notice what was happening. Some smiled, others whispered among themselves. The restaurant atmosphere suddenly seemed warmer. "You have to make a wish before you blow," Kachi reminded with urgency. "It's very important." Amara chuckled softly through tears. "Listen to the birthday expert," she teased tenderly. Akin closed his eyes, trying to think of a wish. All his life he had wished for material things, professional goals, quantifiable successes, but at that moment, with that modest cake before him and these two people, who had given him more in an hour than many in years, he could only wish for one thing. He wished never to forget this night, not to forget how it felt to be truly seen, not to forget that the greatest wealth was not in bank accounts, but in gestures like this. He opened his eyes and looked at Kachi, who watched him expectantly. "Did you make your wish?" the child asked anxiously. Akin nodded, not trusting his voice to reply. Then he gently blew out the candle, and the small flame extinguished, leaving a thin wisp of smoke. Some people at nearby tables applauded spontaneously. Kachi applauded too, beaming with happiness. Amara applauded with tears streaming freely down her cheeks, and Akin simply sat there, looking at that cake, unable to control the tears that finally escaped his eyes. "Thank you," he managed to whisper in a broken voice. "No one has ever." But he couldn't finish the sentence. There weren't enough words. Kachi stood up from his chair and walked around the table to hug Akin with the spontaneity of children. The child's embrace was brief, but contained all the warmth in the world. When Kachi returned to his seat, Akin wiped his eyes with the napkin, no longer caring who might see him cry. "I'm sorry," he apologized in a husky voice. "It's just been a very long time since anyone did anything like that for me." Amara extended her hand across the table, and Akin took it without hesitation. "You don't have to apologize for feeling," she said firmly. "Tears are also a form of bravery." Kachi cut a piece of the cake and placed it on a small plate the waiter had left. "You have to try it, Mr. Akin. It's very tasty," the child encouraged, pushing the plate towards him. Akin took the fork with a trembling hand and took a mouthful. It was a simple vanilla cake, nothing elaborate or expensive, but to him, it tasted of hope, human kindness, everything he had been looking for without knowing. "It's the best cake I've ever tasted in my life," Akin declared with absolute sincerity. And he wasn't exaggerating. Kachi smiled, satisfied. "I want a piece too," the child asked with enthusiasm. Akin cut portions for all three and distributed them carefully. They ate in silence for a few moments, but it was a comfortable silence, full of mutual understanding. None of them knew at that instant that that cake was just the beginning of something much greater. When they finished the cake, Akin felt he needed to do something, anything, to express the gratitude that completely overwhelmed him. He couldn't just get up and leave as if this night were an ordinary dinner. He reached for his wallet in the inside pocket of his agbada, while thinking of the best way to approach what he was about to propose. Amara and Kachi were discussing whether it had been a good idea to spend the sales money on the cake, and the child defended his decision with arguments that made his mother smile. "That was the best use you could make of that money, my love," Amara assured, stroking her son's face. Akin placed his wallet on the table and took out several naira notes, looking for the right ones. "Please, let me do something," he interrupted in a firm but kind voice. "I want to pay the whole bill, yours and anything else you want to order." The atmosphere at the table changed instantly. Amara stopped smiling, and her expression became more serious, though not hostile. Kachi looked between the two adults, sensing the tension but not fully understanding it. "It's not necessary, Akin," Amara replied in a slow voice. "We've already shared the table with you. That's enough." But Akin shook his head. "No, you don't understand. You've given me something priceless tonight," he insisted. "Please, allow me at least to do this." Amara took a deep breath and looked at her son before addressing Akin again. There was dignity in her posture, in the way she straightened her shoulders before speaking. "I really appreciate your offer, truly," she began firmly. "But we also have our pride. We came here with our own money to celebrate Kachi's achievement." Akin felt as if he had just made a terrible mistake, though he wasn't sure what. "I didn't mean to offend," he hastened to say. "I just wanted to thank you." Amara raised a hand to stop him, but her gesture was not abrupt, but gentle. "I know you didn't mean to offend," she reassured, "but you have to understand something. We don't need charity, we need respect. And respect comes from recognizing that we can take care of ourselves." Kachi watched his mother with admiration, clearly accustomed to hearing her defend her dignity. Akin put the notes back in his wallet, feeling awkward and out of place. "You're right, I apologize," he admitted with genuine humility. "I didn't think it might sound like charity." Amara softened her expression and gave him a small smile. "Don't apologize. I know it came from a good heart," she assured. But let me explain something I've learned in these 2 years. Akin listened with total attention, understanding that this was a lesson he needed to learn. When you lose your partner and are left alone with a child, everyone wants to help you, Amara continued in a calm voice. And at first you accept that help because you desperately need it. But there comes a time when you realize that if you keep accepting, you lose something very important. You lose the ability to see yourself as capable, she explained. You start to define yourself by what you've lost, not by what you still have. And I don't want Kachi to grow up seeing his mother as someone who only receives. I want him to see me fighting, winning my own battles. The child took his mother's hand on the table and squeezed it affectionately. You're the strongest, Mum, Kachi murmured with absolute pride. Amara kissed his forehead tenderly. Akin felt something deep moving in his chest, an admiration that went beyond the rational. But there is something you can do for us, Amara added after a moment. Something that is priceless. Akin leaned forward with interest. Whatever it is, he replied sincerely. Amara smiled warmly. Accept this as our birthday gift to you, she said in a soft but firm voice. This dinner, this moment, this cake that Kachi bought with so much love. Amara's words fell upon Akin like a revelation. She wasn't rejecting his help out of empty pride or stubbornness. She was offering him something much more valuable than anything he could buy with money. She was offering him the gift of being generous, of giving from her scarcity, of choosing kindness over convenience. Are you telling me this is my birthday gift? Akin asked, his voice broken by emotion. Amara nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. Yes, because you gave us the gift of your company at our celebration, she replied. And we give you the gift of our company at yours. Kachi clapped as if he had just solved the most important riddle in the world. That's fair, the child exclaimed happily. Everybody wins. Akin felt the tears running freely down his face now, not caring who might see him. This woman had just taught him something all his years of success had not. She had taught him that receiving with gratitude was as important as giving with generosity, that allowing others to be kind was also a gift. I accept, Akin murmured in a barely audible voice. I accept your gift, and it's the best I've received in 41 years. Amara extended both hands across the table, and Akin took them. Kachi placed his small hands on those of the two adults, creating a circle of human connection in the middle of the busy restaurant. They remained like that for several seconds, without needing words to express what they all felt. Akin understood at that instant that this night had changed something fundamental within him. He could no longer continue to measure the value of things solely by their price. He could no longer ignore that true wealth lay in moments like this. The waiter approached discreetly with the bill and placed it in the center of the table. Amara took it before Akin could even try to reach for it. It's our bill, she reminded firmly, but without harshness. Our gift to you. Akin raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, though he smiled through his tears. Understood, he replied, and I will never forget this gift. Never. Kachi smiled, satisfied that everything was clear. Amara took out her modest wallet and began to count the naira notes carefully, checking that she had enough to cover everything, including the tip. Akin watched her every move, engraving this scene in his memory forever. Because that night he had just learned that sometimes the greatest gift is allowing someone else to be generous with you, even when they have less. The bill was paid, and the moment of farewell inevitably approached, filling Akin with an anxiety he hadn't felt in years. He didn't want this night to end. He didn't want to return to his empty apartment and his solitary life after having tasted what true human connection meant. Amara put away her wallet with slow movements, as if she too was in no hurry to end this unexpected encounter. Kachi yawned discreetly, tired after a long day of selling chin-chin and all the emotions of dinner. I think someone needs his bed, Amara commented, stroking her son's hair tenderly. Kachi shook his head vigorously, though another yawn immediately betrayed him. I'm not sleepy, Mum, the child protested without much conviction. Akin smiled at the typical childish resistance to admitting tiredness. You had a very long day, my boy, Akin said softly. You sold all the chin-chin, and besides, you made a stranger very happy. That deserves a good rest. Kachi looked at him with bright eyes. Did we really make you happy? The child asked with that need for confirmation little ones have. Akin nodded with total sincerity. More than you can imagine, he assured, his voice heavy with emotion. This was the best birthday of my life. Amara stood up and helped Kachi down from his chair, smoothing the child's clothes with those automatic gestures only mothers have. Akin also stood, feeling the weight of the impending separation like a stone in his chest. He couldn't let them simply walk away like that, disappearing into the Lagos night, without any way to reconnect. Wait, Akin said with sudden urgency. Can I Can I ask for your phone number? Amara looked at him, surprised, clearly not expecting that request. Kachi smiled broadly, excited by the prospect. Of course, the child replied before his mother could say anything. Amara chuckled softly at Kachi's enthusiasm. Let me speak, my love. She reprimanded him sweetly before turning to Akin. I'm not sure it's a good idea. Akin felt a pang of panic at the possibility that she would refuse. Please, he insisted in a pleading voice. I don't want to lose contact with you both. This night meant a lot to me. Amara hesitated, biting her lower lip as she considered the request. We don't really know each other, she pointed out with reasonable caution. We just shared a dinner, but there was something in her tone that suggested she also felt it had been more than just sharing a table. You're right, we don't know each other, Akin admitted, but I would like to get to know you both. If you also want to, of course. I don't want to pressure you. Kachi tugged at his mother's hand insistently. Say yes, Mum. Mr. Akin is very kind, the child pleaded. Amara looked at her son and then back at Akin, clearly debating internally. There was caution in her eyes, but also something more. Perhaps the same curiosity Akin felt. All right, she finally conceded with a small smile. But only because Kachi insists, and because I think you're genuine. Akin felt a wave of relief so intense, it almost made him dizzy. He pulled out his phone with trembling hands as Amara dictated her number. He saved it immediately with her full name and added a note that said, "The woman, from the cake, to never forget. I'll send a message now so you have my number too," Akin said as he quickly typed. Amara's phone vibrated in her bag seconds later. She took it out and read the message with a smile. Received, she confirmed, putting her phone away again. Kachi bounced with excitement beside her. Now we can talk whenever we want, the child celebrated joyfully. They walked together towards the restaurant exit, neither in a real hurry to reach the door. The October night air greeted them fresh and pleasant when they finally stepped outside. The street was lit by lampposts that cast soft shadows on the pavement. Other diners were also leaving, animatedly discussing their own evenings. Where is your car parked? Akin asked, looking around. Amara exchanged a quick glance with Kachi. We came by bus, she replied naturally, without shame but also without pride. The stop is 2 blocks from here. Akin frowned with genuine concern. Let me take you home, please, he offered immediately. My car is nearby. Amara shook her head firmly. We already talked about this, Akin. We don't need to. But he raised both hands in a gesture of peace. It's not charity, Amara. It's safety, he argued in a serious voice. It's late already, and I wouldn't feel comfortable knowing you're waiting for the bus at this hour. Please. Kachi looked between both adults, clearly hoping his mother would accept. Amara sighed, considering the offer carefully. Only because it's late, she finally accepted. And because Kachi is tired, thank you. Akin felt another wave of relief. At least he could ensure they got home safely before returning to his own solitude. They walked together to where his vehicle was parked, an elegant but not ostentatious car. Akin opened the back door for Kachi, who climbed in with evident excitement. Then he opened the passenger door for Amara, who accepted the gesture with a grateful smile. When Akin sat in the driver's seat, a strange sense of completeness washed over him, as if these two people belonged there in his car, in his life. Where to? He asked, starting the engine. Amara gave him the address, a neighborhood Akin knew as a working-class area of families struggling day to day. The journey began in comfortable silence with Kachi half asleep in the back seat. Akin drove slowly, in no hurry for this moment to end. I have to tell you something, Amara suddenly murmured, breaking the silence. Akin glanced at her, without taking his eyes off the road. Tell me, he encouraged softly. Amara took a deep breath before continuing. Today we almost didn't come to the restaurant, she confessed in a slow voice. I was exhausted after helping Kachi with the sales all day. I just wanted to get home and sleep, but something inside me said I had to stay, that there was a reason to be there tonight. Amara's words floated in the car's air, like a revelation they both needed to process in silence for a few moments. Akin felt a shiver run down his spine, not from cold, but from a deep recognition that something greater than them had orchestrated this encounter. He kept his eyes on the road, but he could feel the intensity of what she had just shared. I felt that too, he admitted, in a barely audible voice. When I was about to leave the restaurant, something stopped me, as if an inner voice told me to wait. Amara turned to look at him with eyes shining in the dimness of the car. Really? She asked with genuine astonishment. Akin nodded as he turned a corner, following the directions she had given him. If I had left 5 minutes earlier, I would never have seen your table, he reflected. I would never have received that gesture from you. I would never have met Kachi. Amara hugged herself as if she suddenly felt cold. My grandmother used to say there are no coincidences, she murmured in a soft voice. That everything that seems like an accident is actually destiny in disguise. Akin considered those words seriously. I never believed in those things, he confessed. I always thought everything was the result of decisions and effort. But tonight makes me question everything. Sometimes life puts us exactly where we need to be, Amara continued with conviction. Even when we don't understand it at the moment. I lost my husband, and I thought my life was over. But Kachi needed me, and that forced me to be stronger than I ever imagined. Akin listened to every word as if they were pieces of a puzzle that was finally beginning to take shape. And I built an entire empire, but I lost everything else in the process, he added bitterly. Until tonight, I hadn't realized how empty I truly was. Kachi stirred in the back seat, half asleep, but still conscious. Are we there yet? The child asked in a sleepy voice. Amara turned back tenderly. Almost, my love, rest a little more, she reassured him. Akin slowed down as he entered the neighborhood Amara had indicated. The streets were narrower here, the houses more modest but well maintained. There was laundry drying on some balconies and flower pots in the windows. It was a neighborhood that spoke of community, of families who knew each other. It's that house, Amara pointed to a small but clean building with a faded blue door. The one with the blue door. Akin parked in front of the house and turned off the engine. The sudden silence seemed to amplify everything. Thank you for bringing us, Amara said, unbuckling her seatbelt, but not yet making a move to get out. Akin turned in his seat to face her directly. Thank you for everything, he replied with intensity. For the gesture, for the companionship, for the lessons, for allowing me to be part of your celebration. Amara smiled warmly. Those were our thanks for making us part of yours, she corrected sweetly. Kachi stretched in the back seat and leaned forward between the two front seats. Will we see you again, Mr. Akin? The child asked with evident hope in his voice. Akin looked at Amara, seeking permission before replying. She nodded slightly. I'd love to, Akin assured the child. If your mum agrees, of course. Amara extended her hand, and Akin took it. That gesture was already becoming familiar between them. That would be fine, she accepted. I think this friendship is just beginning. Kachi celebrated with a small cry of victory that made both adults laugh. Akin helped Amara get Kachi out of the car. The boy was now fully awake with excitement again. They said their goodbyes with hugs. Kachi first with his usual enthusiasm, and then Amara with more reserve, but equal warmth. Take good care, Akin said, watching them walk towards the blue door. Amara turned before entering. You too, and happy birthday again, she replied with a final smile before disappearing into the house with Kachi. Akin remained standing by his car for several minutes, looking at that blue door as if he wanted to memorize every detail. Then, finally, he got into his vehicle and began the drive back to his apartment in the upscale area of Lagos. The contrast between both worlds had never seemed so evident, nor so disturbing. He arrived at his modern building with its underground parking and marble lobby. He rode the silent elevator to his floor and opened the door to his spacious, empty apartment. Everything was exactly as he had left it, impeccable, ordered, cold. He took off his agbada and hung it carefully before walking towards the window, overlooking the illuminated city. Lagos glowed below with thousands of lights, each representing a life, a story, and for the first time in a long time, Akin felt connected to that humanity pulsating in the streets. He took out his phone and looked at Amara's number saved there. He wanted to write to her, but he didn't know what to say that wouldn't sound too intense or desperate. Finally, he wrote something simple. I got home safely. I hope you both did too. Thank you again for this unforgettable night. He pressed send and left the phone on the table without expecting an immediate reply. But the phone vibrated just a few minutes later. We arrived well. Kachi is already asleep, but before he made me promise I'd let him talk to you soon. I also want to thank you. Tonight was special for everyone. Akin smiled, reading the message, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. He quickly replied, I'd love to talk to Kachi whenever he wants. And with you too, of course. Can I write tomorrow? The reply came almost immediately. I'd like that. And so began something neither of them had anticipated, but which both desperately needed. Over the following days, Akin and Amara exchanged messages with increasing frequency. In the beginning, they were superficial conversations about the day, about the weather, about small anecdotes, but gradually they deepened, sharing fears and dreams they normally kept to themselves. Akin told her about the pressure of maintaining his successful company, about sleepless nights worrying about decisions that affected hundreds of employees, about how success had isolated him more than he ever imagined possible. Amara shared her daily struggles, the constant fear of not being able to provide enough for Kachi, the loneliness of nights when the child was asleep. The nightly conversations became Akin's favorite part of the day. After long hours in the office, making decisions that moved millions of naira, the only thing he really looked forward to was seeing Amara's message appear on his screen. Sometimes they were long texts, other times just a brief greeting, but each one meant she had thought of him, that he existed in someone's mind beyond business meetings. One night, Amara sent him a photo of Kachi proudly showing a drawing he had made at school. It was a simple drawing of 3 people around a table with a cake. "He drew me and you," Amara's message read. "He says it was the best day of his life." Akin looked at that drawing with tears in his eyes. A 9-year-old child had included him in one of his best memories. He, who had always felt invisible in what truly mattered, was now part of someone's story. "It was the best day for me too," he replied with total honesty. And so, message after message, conversation after conversation, something grew between them. Something neither dared to name yet, but which both felt with increasing certainty. Akin began to measure his days, not by professional achievements, but by the moment he would see Amara's name light up on his screen. And for the first time in 41 years, he understood that he had been looking in the wrong places all this time. After 2 weeks of constant messages, Akin finally gathered the courage to take the next step. It was a Saturday morning when he wrote the message he had been mentally rehearsing for days. "Would you like us to go somewhere?" he wrote. "You, Kachi, and I. Nothing formal, just spend time together." He stared at the screen, his heart racing like a teenager waiting for a reply from his first love. Amara's reply arrived after a few minutes that felt like hours. "I'd love to. Kachi would too. What did you have in mind?" Akin smiled with relief. He had researched places appropriate for a child, avoiding anything too ostentatious that might make Amara feel uncomfortable. Finally, he suggested Lekki Conservation Center, an open space where they could walk, talk, and where Kachi could play without restrictions. They agreed to meet on Sunday afternoon. Akin barely slept that night, nervous in a way he couldn't remember experiencing before. He changed his clothes 3 times before leaving, looking for something casual that wouldn't highlight the economic difference between them. He arrived at the meeting point 15 minutes early, waiting by the main entrance of the park. The October sun fell gently on Lagos, and families already filled the green space with laughter and conversations. Then he saw them. Amara walked hand in hand with Kachi, both dressed simply but impeccably clean. When Kachi recognized him, the child let go of his mother's hand and ran towards him with open arms. Akin knelt to receive the little one's hug, feeling a warmth he didn't know he had been missing. Amara arrived afterward, smiling with that sparkle in her eyes. Akin had learned to recognize from their nightly conversations. "We're punctual," she announced with gentle pride. Akin stood up, and for a moment, he hesitated whether he should hug her too. She resolved the doubt by taking the first step, offering him a brief but meaningful embrace. "I'm so happy to see you both," Akin said with absolute sincerity. Kachi practically bounced with excitement. "Mummy says we can go see the monkeys," the child exclaimed, pointing towards the park's canopy walk entrance. Akin chuckled at the enthusiasm. "All right, then let's go see those monkeys," he replied, offering his hand to the child. Kachi took it without hesitation. Amara walked on Kachi's other side, the 3 forming a small human chain as they ventured into the park. Akin felt strangely complete in that simple moment. They weren't in an elegant restaurant, nor anywhere impressive. They were just walking in a public park on a Sunday afternoon, and it was perfect. They reached the canopy walk entrance where they saw several monkeys playing lazily. Kachi watched them fascinated while Amara and Akin sat on a nearby bench. "I have to tell you something," Akin began after a moment of comfortable silence. Amara turned to look at him attentively. "Tell me," she encouraged softly. Akin took a deep breath, searching for the right words to express something that had been growing inside him since that night at the restaurant. "That night, when you and Kachi invited me to your table, something changed in me," he confessed, looking at the monkeys. "It wasn't just that you gave me company on my birthday. It was the way you did it." Amara waited patiently for him to continue without interrupting. "All my life I measured success in numbers," he continued. "In how much money I had, how many deals I closed, how big my company was. I thought that was wealth. But you both taught me something different." Kachi ran back towards them with a bright green leaf he had found in the grass. "Look what I found," the child showed proudly. Amara examined it with genuine interest. "It's very beautiful, my love. Keep it safe," she told him, kissing his forehead. Kachi ran back towards the monkeys with his treasure. Akin observed the scene with a mixture of tenderness and melancholy. "You taught me that true wealth is not in what you have," he continued. "It's in what you're willing to share when you have little." Amara looked at him now with total attention, her eyes shining with contained emotion. Akin turned to face her directly, wanting her to see the sincerity on his face. "You shared your table when you only had one plate for two," he said in a choked voice. "Kachi spent his hard-earned money on a cake for a stranger. You gave me your time, your attention, your kindness, and you expected nothing in return." Amara blinked rapidly, fighting back the tears that threatened to escape. "We just did what felt right," she murmured, her voice trembling. Akin shook his head. "You did much more than that," he insisted. "You reminded me that being human is not about accumulating things. It's about connecting with other people, about seeing another's pain and choosing to alleviate it, even if it's with something small." Amara finally let the tears stream freely down her cheeks. "You also gave us a lot," she replied, taking his hand. "You gave us respect. You didn't treat us like charity or like a project. You saw us as equals." Akin squeezed her hand gently. "Because that's what you are, my equals, my superiors in many ways," he admitted with genuine humility. They remained like that for a moment, hands intertwined, looking at each other with a deep understanding of what was growing between them. Kachi ran back again, this time bringing an interesting stick he had discovered. The two adults chuckled through tears, quickly wiping their eyes so as not to worry the child. They spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the park. Akin bought ice cream for all three, insisting that it was just a small treat and not charity. They played on the swings with Kachi, Akin pushing the child higher and higher, while his laughter filled the air. Amara watched them from a nearby bench, smiling with a happiness she hadn't felt in a long time. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with oranges and pinks, the three sat on the grass to watch the sunset. Kachi lay between both adults, exhausted but happy. "This was the best day," the child murmured sleepily. Akin looked at Amara over Kachi's head. "For me too," he said softly. Amara held his gaze. "For me too," she repeated almost in a whisper. And at that moment, sitting on the grass of a public park as the sun set over Lagos, the three understood that this was more than friendship. It was the beginning of something that could change their lives forever. Akin felt a peace he had never experienced before. He didn't need to impress anyone with luxuries, nor demonstrate his success with grandiose gestures, because he had finally found people who valued him simply for who he was. The months that followed that day at the park were a constant revelation for Akin. His encounters with Amara and Kachi became increasingly frequent, increasingly natural. They were no longer planned events, but an organic part of their lives. Akin learned to enjoy the simple things he had previously ignored. Helping Kachi with his maths homework, cooking with Amara in her small kitchen, watching movies on their modest sofa. The house with the blue door became his favorite refuge, the only place where he could simply be Akin, not the successful businessman, nor the lonely man. Kachi had spontaneously started calling him Uncle Akin, and every time he heard it, Akin felt his heart expand a little more. Amara and he never explicitly spoke about what they were to each other, but the prolonged glances, the hands that sought each other automatically, the good morning and good night messages said everything without words. Akin had begun to use part of his fortune in ways he never imagined. Not by giving money directly to Amara, she would never have accepted that, but by creating opportunities. He got her contacts to expand her traditional snack business. He helped enroll Kachi in a sports scholarship program that the child immensely enjoyed. He did everything discreetly, always respecting Amara's dignity, and she, in turn, gave him something no amount of money could buy: an emotional home. Now, a year after that lonely birthday in the restaurant, Akin found himself again before a table, but this time it was different. This time the table was in the house with the blue door, decorated with colorful balloons and streamers that Kachi had insisted on hanging everywhere. The kitchen smelled of jollof rice and small chops that Amara had lovingly prepared all day. Kachi ran around the house with the excitement of someone who knows something special is about to happen. "It's almost time," the child shouted, checking the living room clock every 5 minutes. Amara came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, smiling at her son's enthusiasm. "Calm down, my love. There's still a little while," she reminded him patiently. Akin was sitting on the sofa, observing the scene with a mixture of wonder and gratitude. A year ago, he had been alone in an elegant restaurant, being turned away for lack of a table. Today he was surrounded by love in a modest home that had welcomed him as family. "Do you need help with anything?" Akin offered, getting up from the sofa. Amara shook her head. "Everything is ready. We just need the guests to arrive," she replied with a special sparkle in her eyes. Akin had insisted that he didn't want a big celebration. But Amara had invited some close neighbors and Kachi's friends. She wanted him to experience what a true birthday surrounded by community felt like. When the guests began to arrive, the small house filled with laughter and conversations. The neighbors brought dishes to share, following the Nigerian tradition of never arriving empty-handed. Children ran everywhere, playing with Kachi. Adults chatted animatedly about everything and nothing. Akin found himself talking with Baba Bayo, the elderly neighbor who lived 2 houses down and who turned out to have fascinating stories about old Lagos. He shared soft drinks with Iya Biodun, who told him how Amara had been a blessing to the neighborhood since she arrived. "That girl has a heart of gold," Iya Biodun declared with conviction. "And it shows that you, young man, also see it in the way you look at your family." Akin didn't correct the lady's mistake in assuming they were his family, because in every way that mattered, they were. When it was time for dinner, everyone gathered around the table, which had been extended with an additional plank to accommodate everyone. It was chaotic, noisy, perfectly imperfect. Kachi insisted on sitting next to Akin. Amara was on the other side, serving generous portions of food to each guest. "Before we eat, I want to say something," Kachi announced, standing on his chair. Everyone fell silent, smiling at the little one's seriousness. "A year ago, my mum and I met Uncle Akin at a restaurant," the child began in a clear voice. "He was alone on his birthday, and we invited him to sit with us. And since that day, everything changed," Kachi continued, looking at Akin with bright eyes. "Uncle Akin became part of our family. He taught us many things, and we taught him too. Now he is no longer alone, and neither are we." Akin felt tears streaming down his face, without any shame. Amara also cried, smiling, as she wiped her eyes with a napkin. "So, I want to thank you for being the best uncle in the world," Kachi concluded. "Happy birthday, Uncle Akin." All the guests applauded with enthusiasm. Some guests also wiped their eyes, moved by the child's words. Akin stood up and hugged Kachi tightly, whispering a "thank you, my boy," that only the child could hear. When he sat down again, Amara took his hand under the table and squeezed it tenderly. They didn't need words to communicate what they both felt. Dinner flowed with laughter, stories, and that warmth that only exists when people genuinely care about each other. Then came the moment for the cake, a large one decorated with the phrase, "Happy Birthday," Akin written in blue icing. This time there was more than one candle, and when Akin blew them all out, his wish was simple, that this feeling of belonging would last forever. The guests began to leave gradually as the night progressed, each bidding farewell with hugs and promises to see each other soon. Finally, only the 3 of them remained, Akin, Amara, and Kachi. The child was lying on the sofa, half asleep, exhausted but happy. Amara and Akin washed the dishes together in the kitchen, working in harmonious silence. "Thank you for all of this," Akin murmured as he dried a plate. Amara looked at him with tenderness. "You thank us every day with your presence," she replied. "With your kindness, with your respect for me, with your way of making us feel important." Akin put down the plate and turned to face her completely. "You are the most important things in my life," he confessed, his voice heavy with emotion. "This year has been the best of my existence, not because of money nor business, but because of you two." Amara approached him and hugged him. Akin wrapped his arms around her, breathing in the scent of her hair and feeling the warmth of her body against his. They remained like that for long minutes, unhurried, needing nothing more. "True love," Amara whispered against his chest. "It begins when someone chooses to share the little they have, not to impress with a lot." Akin smiled, remembering those exact words from a year ago, words he himself had thought that night in the restaurant. "And it all started with a silent wave," he added in a soft voice, "and a shared table." They slowly separated, looking at each other with all the love they had been cultivating for 12 months. Kachi appeared at the kitchen door, rubbing his eyes. "Can I sleep with you both tonight?" the child asked in a sleepy voice. Akin looked at Amara, seeking approval. She nodded with a smile. "Of course, my love," she replied, carrying the child in her arms towards their bedroom. Akin followed, his heart so full that he felt it might burst. The 3 settled in Amara's bed, Kachi in the middle, hugging both adults. The room was dark, except for the faint light coming in from the street. "Uncle Akin," Kachi murmured half asleep. "Yes?" Akin replied softly. Will you stay with us forever? Akin looked at Amara over the child's head. In her eyes, he saw the same question, the same hope. If you both want me here, I'll stay forever, he promised with total sincerity. Kachi smiled, satisfied, and seconds later was deeply asleep. Amara extended her free hand over the child, and Akin took it. They intertwined their fingers, creating a circle of love that protected Kachi in the center. And so, in that modest bed in a house with a blue door, Akin finally understood the true meaning of wealth. It wasn't in bank accounts, nor in professional achievements, but in moments exactly like this, surrounded by people who loved him, not for what he had, but for who he was. 5 years after that first meeting, the Amara Akin Foundation had become one of the most respected organizations in the country. Akin, now 46, walked without any assistance and had fully returned to his business activities, but with a completely different focus. Kachi, at 14, was in his first year of senior secondary school and had already been accepted into a pre-med program at the University of Lagos. His goal was to specialize in social medicine to continue the foundation's work. Amara managed a network of family support centers that extended across 5 Nigerian states. Her story of triumph had made her one of the most recognized social workers in the country. "Father," Kachi said one Sunday afternoon, as they reviewed the foundation's expansion plans together, "do you remember the first question you asked me? Which one? If I was sure you could be happy again." Akin smiled. "Of course I remember. I knew I could, but not because of money." "Then why?" "Because I saw in your eyes that there was still love inside. And where there is love, there is always hope. And where there is hope, there are always miracles." Akin hugged his son, because Kachi was his son in every way that mattered. The boy who had changed his life forever, who had taught him that the truest miracles do not come from heaven, but are born from the human heart when it opens to love. That night, as the 3 generations of the Santos family gathered, including Amara's parents, Mama Ngozi and Papa Emeka, who had moved to Lagos to be near their daughter, Akin raised his glass of water. "I want to make a toast," he said. "To what?" Amara asked. "To the wisest child I've ever known, who taught me that it's never too late to start over, that love can heal any wound, and that miracles exist for those who have the courage to believe in them." "Cheers," Kachi shouted, raising his glass of juice. "Cheers," Amara and her parents repeated, and as they toasted, each of them knew they had lived their own miracle. Not the kind of miracle from movies, but the most real and powerful kind of all. The miracle of love that transforms, heals, and unites forever. The story of Akin, Amara, and Kachi had shown the world that sometimes families are not born, they are chosen, that true love can overcome any obstacle, and that when one person believes in you, you can move mountains. Thus, the night that had begun with a man alone in a restaurant, saying, "I have no one," had turned into a lifetime of love, purpose, and miracles. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and share. Your participation helps us continue telling stories that inspire and transform lives. Tell us in the comments, do you believe that love can move mountains? From what city are you watching us? Your opinion is very important to us. Remember, the smallest gestures can change entire lives, and true wealth is always found in the people we choose to love and who choose us back. Sometimes God puts people in our path exactly when we need them most, even if we don't know it at that moment. A simple gesture, a shared table, a candle lit for a stranger, all of this can be the beginning of something extraordinary that will change your life forever. It doesn't matter how much you have or how much you lack. What matters is your willingness to share, to see another's pain and choose to alleviate it, to open your heart to the true connections that destiny places before you. Because in the end, we are all looking for the same thing: to belong, to be seen, to be loved for who we truly are. May God bless your path and place the right people in your life at the perfect moment, just as He did with Akin, Amara, and Kachi. May you never lack a table to sit at, a hand to hold you, and a heart that understands you. Amen.